Let's talk about genetics. You get 23 chromosomes from mom and 23 chromosomes from dad. You may get the same alleles of a gene or different ones. Part of it depends on what your parents have to give you. The genotype are the actual genes that are present. The phenotype is the physical expression of the genotype. You can have a dominant trait that even if only one copy is present, it is expressed. You can have the recessive trait, which could be masked by a dominant trait if you have it, or the recessive trait can be expressed phenotypically if there is no dominant trait present to mask it. Your genotype can be homozygous dominant or heterozygous recessive, meaning you only have one type of allele present. Your genotype could also be heterozygous, which means that you could have a copy of both the dominant gene and the recessive gene, but you would see the physical expression of the dominant trait. Let's look at a monohybrid cross. Earlobes are genetic. The dominant trait is unattached earlobes. If two people who are homozygous dominant mate, the only option they have to give their offspring is the dominant trait. Therefore, the offspring will be homozygous dominant and have unattached earlobes. Is it possible for these people to have a child with attached earlobes? No, it is not. Why or why not? Because they don't have the recessive trait to pass down. If two people who are heterozygous mate, then the genotypic ratios will be different than the previous cross. The genotypic ratio will be 1 to 2 to 1. We will have one homozygous dominant, and we will have two heterozygous, and we will have one homozygous recessive. The phenotypic result will be 3 to 1. And that is because phenotypically there are 3 chances for this offspring to have the dominant trait, which is unattached earlobes, and only 25%, or 1 out of 4, to be recessive. If two people with attached earlobes mate, the only genotype that they can pass down is the recessive trait, and therefore the phenotypic will be all attached for all of their offspring. So all of the offspring would be homozygous recessive, which phenotypically means that they would have attached earlobes. Is it possible for these people to have a child with unattached earlobes? No. Why? Because they do not have a dominant trait that they can pass down. If we have one individual that is heterozygous and it mates with an individual who is homozygous recessive, then the genotypic results are going to be 50% heterozygous and 50% homozygous recessive. And the phenotypic results will also be 50-50. 50% attached and 50% unattached. So let's look at human autosomal traits. So on this table, you're going to go through and you are going to figure out what you are. The phenotype is what you see, and the genotype are your possible genes that are actually present. So if you look at your hairline, if you have a widow's peak, it's dominant. That just means it's a dominant trait, does not mean it's dominant in the population. You do not know whether you are homozygous dominant or heterozygous, so you circle both of them. If you have a straight hairline, then you have no widow's peak, and you are homozygous recessive. Earlobes, if you are unattached, it is dominant. You would be homozygous dominant or heterozygous. Attached earlobes would mean that you're homozygous recessive. For skin pigmentation, you're looking at freckles across your nose. And so if you have freckles, they're dominant, and no freckles would be homozygous recessive. Look at the back of your hand. If you have any hair at all present, then it is dominant. If you do not, then you are homozygous recessive. The bent little finger, this means that this little finger actually bends toward the ring finger. And so if you have that, that's the dominant trait. And if you don't, if your fingers are straight, then you are homozygous recessive. Take your hands, hold them out in front of you, and put them together without thinking about it. Interlace your fingers and look and see which thumb is on top. If the left thumb is on top, then you're dominant. If the right thumb is on top, then you're homozygous recessive. For tongue rolling, we're talking about actually being able to make a taco with your tongue. If you are a tongue roller, you are dominant, homozygous dominant, or heterozygous. And if you cannot roll your tongue, then you are homozygous recessive. So looking at some genetic problems, Joe does not have a bent little finger, but his parents do. What are the possible genotypes of his parents? So Joe does not have a bent little finger, which means that he is homozygous recessive. But his parents do, which tells us they have at least one dominant trait. Well, the only way for Joe to have gotten the two recessive genes is for both parents to be heterozygous. So his parents have to be heterozygous. Henry is adopted and he has hair on the back of his hand. Could both of his parents have had hair on the back of their hands? Yes, because it's a dominant trait. Could both of his parents have had no hair on the back of their hands? No, because that's homozygous recessive. And since he has hair, at least one of his parents had to have had hair on the back of their hands. A dihybrid cross looks at two traits. We're going to look at corn. The kernels can be purple or yellow, and their second trait is smooth and rough. The possible genotypes that could come together are big P and big S, which is purple and smooth. We have big P and little s, which is purple and rough. We have little p and big S, which is yellow and smooth. And then we have little p and little s, that's yellow and rough. So we fill in our Punnett square with the different possible types of genotypes that could go into the gametes. When we look at the genotypes, all it takes is one big P and one big S to be purple and smooth. So when we look at that, we have all of these that are purple and smooth. Have to be careful how I do this. Right here. These are not. Did I do it right? No, I didn't. Let's cross through here. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 that are purple and smooth. Purple and rough, you need a big P and you need two small S's. So big P, small S's, big P, small S's. So we have 3 of those. And then yellow and smooth, we have no big P's, so 2 small P's and a big S. So we have 3 of those. And then we have one that is yellow and rough. It's completely homozygous recessive. Okay, so our phenotypic ratio among the offspring is 9 to 3 to 3 to 1. 9 for purple and smooth, 3 for purple and rough, 3 for yellow and smooth, and 1 for yellow and rough. How is the sex of offspring determined? Well, the sperm has two options as to what sex chromosome it can send to the gametes. It can send an X or a Y. The female, however, only has one sex chromosome option, and that is just the X. So when we fill in this Punnett square, we can see that we have 50% possibility that there is female, and we have 50% chance of having male offspring. Looking at color blindness, in this figure, an individual with normal color vision will see a 5 revealed in the dot pattern. An individual with red-green, the most common color blindness, will see a 2 revealed in the dots. So the only colorblind member of Arlene's family is her brother. So what is her brother's genotype? Well, he's male and he's colorblind, so he is X, little b, Y. And what is her father's genotype? Well, her father could not have given him the defective colorblind gene because he had to give him the Y, so his father is normal. What is the mother's genotype then? Well, she had to be carrying the colorblind gene on the X chromosome, and that's the one that she would have given to Arlene's brother. And her mother was not colorblind, so she is heterozygous. What is Arlene's genotype if she later has a colorblind son? Well, Arlene is not colorblind. That means that she does have a normal gene. And if she has a colorblind son, it means that she was carrying the colorblind gene and passed it down to him. If you are female and are not colorblind, you can judge whether you are homozygous or heterozygous by knowing if any member of your family is colorblind. If your father is colorblind, what is your genotype? Okay, so you're female and your father is colorblind, which means the only X he could give you would be the little b. Okay, and you're not colorblind, so that means that you have a big B, but you had to get a little b from your dad. If your mother is colorblind, then what is your genotype? So if mom's colorblind, she's homozygous recessive, or she's homozygous for the colorblind gene, and you are not colorblind, so you have the big B, and you have to get a recessive trait from your mom, so it means that you're heterozygous. If you know of no one who in your family who is colorblind, what is your probable genotype? Remember, you're female, you're not colorblind, nobody else is. Chances are you're not a carrier for the colorblind gene. So then question number 3 is, are you colorblind and what is your genotype? So fruit flies, they can have red eyes, which is dominant, over white eyes, which is recessive. So we're going to do a cross between a red-eyed male and a heterozygous female. So when we fill in our Punnett square, we can see the expected phenotypic results for this cross. So the females, we're just looking at these results right here, are phenotypically going to all have red eyes because they have the dominant trait. The males are going to be on this side, and 50% of them are going to have red eyes and 50% are going to have white eyes. Let's look at codominant inheritance. There are 4 blood types, A, B, AB, and O. A and B are codominant alleles, which means that they're both expressed at the same time. O is the recessive blood type, meaning you do not have either of the dominant traits of A or B. So both A and B blood types can carry an O recessive. So you don't know if you're homozygous or if you're heterozygous when you have A and B blood. A female with A blood type, we don't know if she is homozygous or heterozygous, mates with a male with O blood type. What are the possible genotypes their offsprings could have? Draw 2 Punnett squares to show all the options. On one square we're going to make her homozygous, and on the other square we're going to make her heterozygous. And because the male is O blood type, that's his only option. And then we're going to fill in the Punnett squares. So we can see from the Punnett squares the options of what the offspring could have would be A blood type, or on the other Punnett square they could have A or O. Just depends on whether the mom is homozygous or heterozygous. A male that has the blood type AB is named as the father of a child with blood type O. The mother has blood type B. So even if the mother is heterozygous, we want to know, is it possible for the man to be the father of this child? If we fill in this Punnett square, we can see that it doesn't matter whether the mom's heterozygous or not. There is no square that only has 2 O's, so no, he cannot be the father. A man with A blood type, we don't know if he is homozygous or heterozygous, marries a woman with B blood type. We don't know if she is homozygous or heterozygous. What are the potential genotypes for their future offspring? Draw all the Punnett squares to determine the genotype of their future offspring. When we draw the Punnett squares, we put homozygous on one, homozygous and heterozygous on the second one, homozygous and heterozygous the other way on the third one, and the fourth one they're both heterozygous. When we fill in the Punnett squares, we can see all of the options for what their potential children could have as a blood type. So in case 1, they would all be AB. In case 2, they would be AB or O. In case 3, they would be AB or B. And the last case, they would AB, B, A, or O. They could be anything.